Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 690. This week, we revisit the age-old statements, I don't want to be measured, and its alter ego, management will use metrics against me. While often stated as if they are questions, both are positions. We weave in two recent techniques from our Re-read of Agile Conversations to consider the interests behind the statements. Also, Jeremy Berriault weighs in on the need for testing strategies in Agile on this edition of the QA Corner. I Don't Want to Be Measured by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. Why should we measure? Because management will use it against us. Frankly, this question has to be as old as organized human labor. Conceivably, if other races exist and have existed in the universe, it is even older. There are several answers to the question. However, I thought it would be interesting to apply the interests, not position approach espoused in Chapter 5 of Agile Conversations. Are you participating in our reread of that book? Just in case you are not participating in the reread, positions define where we stand. Attendance at next week's community of practice is mandatory is a position. A position is generated from an interest, not always stated. There could be a number of interests leading to the demand for mandatory attendance. Understanding the possible interests opens up a number of potential avenues for satisfying the demand and/or for shaping the why for the organization or team. I generated a table of possible positions using coherence busting from Agile Conversations, an earlier chapter, to break through my personal biases. I rephrased the original statement to, I do not want to be measured, to make it a bit more generic. Using the new position statement, I generated the following responses. Think of a table with two sides, one side being the position, I do not want to be measured, and the right side of that table being possible corresponding interests. 1. Management will use the data incorrectly. 2. Management is evil and looking for a reason to target specific people or groups. 3. I am very lazy and I do not want to get caught. 4. I can't influence any of the metrics. 5. Collecting the data for metrics means not working on real work. 6. My well-being will be based on someone else's interpretation of the data. 7. I had no input into the decision whether to measure and what to measure. Combining the two techniques, interests not position and coherence busting, has shifted my perspective on how to engage in a conversation on the topic. In the past, my knee-jerk reaction is to assure anyone that asks this or a similar question that management has been trained in how to use metrics, if true. That everyone will be coached on usage, if true. And management will do whatever they want in the long run. Given the latter point, it's often better to lead the measurement conversation than to ignore it and just let it happen. Didn't Stephen Covey say, act or be acted upon? My new perspective suggests several different avenues to explore. Passing aside that management is evil or that the person making the statement is work avoidant, I probably should stop reading Dilbert every day, and especially before I write. Discussions of the questioner's interests are more apt to find a useful approach to implementing and using metrics. For example, to reduce the impact on work, the measures and metric data can be a natural outcome of the tools teams use, reducing the effort cost of collecting data. Whether the statement is, I don't want to be measured, or management will use metrics against us, the response is not as simple as, you're wrong. Statements like those are positions that are the result of one or more interests. Before responding, consider those interests and begin engaging where interests coincide or have similarities to your own. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com. We look forward to the conversation. Jeremy Berriault, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Always a pleasure to be here. And I think by the time this comes on, there's going to be snow on the ground, right?
There could be, or I could run them all next week, and there might actually still be leaves on the trees. Maybe not a lot of leaves, but there'd be certainly leaves on the trees. Jeremy, tonight on your wonderful QA Corner, can we talk about QA testing strategy in Agile? Is that a thing in a sprint? Do you have one for a sprint? Do you have one for a group of sprints?
Yeah, I know there's probably people out there, Agilists, that kind of cringe at the thought when they hear stuff like that, because it seems, when you say testing strategy, it seems like the boogeyman waterfall in the closet coming out saying, "Oh, we're doing this now." I think with everything that we do, with everything that's being done in an Agile environment, you still have to have a strategy. You still have to have those guidelines. It doesn't have to be a very detailed strategy, but you still need to have guidelines so that the team, the individuals, when they work together, when they hit a certain situation, they can look at this or at least recall it and say, "Oh, okay, we should be focused on doing this or that." And that's really, to me, that's what most strategies are. And like with an Agile team, is it's your guidelines to getting the work done.
Let me stop you just for a second, just to make sure I understand. How do you define QA strategy? What is that? What does that word, what does that phrase mean?
So for me, to define QA strategy is just guidance. I think if I was to put it to a word, is guidance. It's giving the opportunity for the teams to work to document or state, or however they want to put it. They want to put it on stickies on a board within their team when everyone's allowed to go back into their office, put it on a wiki page. It's just saying, this is how we're going to these are the goals we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on ensuring that we have an automation script set up for 80% of the test cases we try to create. We want to kind of, here's our watermark we want to hit. Here's where, if there's certain situations that come up, here's how we should deal with them as a team and going forward. Like, I remember writing test strategies about 20 years ago where they were full-fledged 30-page documents, which were more plans than actual strategy. And it didn't give any guidance. It just basically said, this is what we're going to do. And this was that. I think as we look back, as we look at things now, everything is now more guidelines. If we look at, we look at Scrum. Like, Scrum came out with their updated framework earlier this year or late last year. The years kind of merged in a bit. It's getting better now, but for a while there, if you told me it was like 1982, I could have probably believed you, because I've been stuck in my house for a while. But if you look at those more like they're prescription, they were guidance, they're guidelines to get the work done, to work within the framework. And to me, the strategy is the same, like a testing strategy, a QA strategy. And I know we talked about the difference between QA and testing. So they're two separate type strategies, but they're the guidelines for the teams to get the work done. in that fashion and within that discipline.
So what level does that happen? Is that something that you create for every sprint? Is that something you create for a product?
So if we were looking within a sprint, I think within a sprint, if you have a team charter and sprint goals set up, it could be just one small line on the charter, one small line on the goals, and something different outside of the norm of what you want to achieve. You're looking at a release or a product. Now there it could be a little bit more detailed. Have something on a whiteboard or a wiki page, just that teams and individuals can fall back on, just to have that extra guidance. If they're most teams, a self-managed team, they should be able to work together and get stuff done. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have some information available just in case they need to make a decision and they're having maybe a little bit of a rough go about it. If you look at it from a department, division wide, like 5-6 sprint teams, then you're going to branch out. You're going to create a bit of a larger document or larger page and guidance, because now you got a lot more moving parts on how to kind of deal with stuff, but you're still giving them the free rein that they can do what they need to do to get the job done, but you're giving them the guardrails and the guidelines for the fall between, so that they don't put any undue risk onto anyone within the team or within the product.
How does, in reality, if you're working in a day-to-day sprint team, or let's say you're doing Kanban, doesn't matter, right? How does a team actually use a strategy? How does it actually inform their behavior?
Wording it in that fashion, I would say they can't, because you don't want individuals to continuously fall back on something that is documented all the time. Like you have to work with them and have them understand that they have the ability to get through, and let them know, like, okay, here's roughly the guidelines. I've worked with teams where they did that, where they would fall back, like, oh, we gotta review this. We gotta review that. They would go. You could see the site visits for a particular wiki page. Like, it's just into like the hundreds, into the thousands of people going back and just checking things out. And to me, if it gets in that fashion, that means that from a leadership perspective, and from like taking that step back and looking at the team, looking at the leadership is, to me, not allowing the teams to be that self-managed team. Somehow there's something within the culture where they have to fall back on stuff. They want to be told what to do. And it's tricky. Like I've written a test strategy for a group, for a set of agile teams, and I created it. I put it on a wiki page. I put it there, and it was fairly lengthy. It was a couple pages, but I wrote it in such a fashion where it was just those guidelines. And I told the teams, it's there for you in case you like almost break glass in the case of emergency, to take a look. But for the most part, I gave them the free reins. Like, you guys know what you're doing. This is what you got your definition done. Here's roughly, this is what we want to see coming in the end. How you get there, it's up to you guys. And it's trying to, I think, giving that free rein, I think that's what's going to help get that behavior set. If you don't, then people keep falling back on stuff. It's going to be a tough go. I think that's a tough answer to do too, because
one of the things that I find valuable for things like strategies is the act of thinking through it. I am not, generally, once things get written down, they rarely, in my estimation, ever get looked at again. And that's, there are a lot of reasons for that. And as a coach, there are a lot of ways I think we can help people look at things like that again. But the act of thinking through something I think can help channel behavior. And so having a strategy, thinking through what that strategy might be, challenging some of the really closely held beliefs to get to that. I think there's value in that process. I don't think just having one necessarily causes people to do anything rightly or wrongly. I think things like team charters, again, valuable, team agreements, valuable, but a lot of times they are shelfware. So that always frightens me just a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, and I agree that I hate writing documents or writing stuff like on wiki pages or anything like that, or even writing on a whiteboard. I hate writing stuff or having stuff written down if it's not used, or at least kind of followed or anything like that. Like you said, shelfware. Like, I don't want to do something just for the sake of doing it. Like the strategy that I wrote, it felt good. Like, okay, I wrote it, and like a few people went through it and they understood it. But to your point, like they understood the thought process. They understood, okay, this is how, okay, we gotta think, we gotta kind of get through to get the work done. And for me, I see it as I set the goalpost. If they want to run, if they want to do a straight route to the goalpost, or do a button hook or anything, whatever football analogy you want to use, they want to get that to get to the end zone, get to the goalpost, then that's fine. Like they understand the scenario at the time and the right play, the right moves, the right things to do to get to where they need to get. So this is just kind of telling them, like, hey guys, and every strategy I've written in probably like the past 10 years, I've never written on my own. Never. I always involve people. I always involve the team. So then they have the ownership, and that gives them part of understanding the thought process along with it. And then again, it's up on a wiki page. If I see, like, let's just say I have a team of 10 and I see like maybe 15 views, and that stays 15 views for like a month or 2 months, perfect. Because that's telling me that it's sunk in, we understood it, and then we can revisit it later to see if we have to do any updates.
That's what retrospectives are for. Jeremy, if people wanted to continue the conversation, how would they go about doing that?
They can reach me through LinkedIn. Do a search for my name, Jeremy Berriault. You'll see a lot of letters at the end of my name that I think you'll know who I am. You can also reach me through Twitter @jberriault, and you can reach me through my webpage, berriaultandassociates.com.
Super. Jeremy, thank you again for bringing your wonderful QA corner to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. If it isn't snowing, I hope it's snowing soon, because this ought to be somewhere around December. So it might be time for, a snowy December, or end of December maybe.
It could be. I'll make sure my snowblower is nice and tuned up just in case.
Okay, super. Jeremy, again, until next month, have a wonderful month, and let's start chewing on some other cool topics.
Oh, most definitely. You too.
In Reread Saturday News, Week 7 of our Re-read of Agile Conversations by Douglas Squirrel and Jeffrey Fredrick begins Chapter 5, addressing the why conversation. Like the fear conversation, we'll approach this in 2 parts, focusing this week on 2 areas: positions and interests, and inquiry and advocacy. We will tackle joint design next week. In an update of my weekly experiments as we are reading Agile Conversations, I set out to create a fear matrix. That sounds like a movie title, doesn't it? I failed. But more importantly, I was able to use the fear matrix approach as a structure for a retrospective. It worked well. The idea of exposing and mitigating fears shifted perspectives nicely. Interestingly, what was hard was tying the fears and mitigations to espoused norms. In conversations afterwards, it became apparent that it was hard to admit that your behavior is or was at odds with the norms of the team and the organization. It's worth another conversation to make sure the link is clear. Next week, I'm going to explore building a position interest chart. Remember, buy a copy and read along. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, Kevin McKeel will visit the SPaMCAST to talk AI and software estimation tools. Is this the end of the world for the software estimating profession or the beginning of a golden age? If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?